How can you sleep comfortably when a blizzard is raging outside the thin skin walls and the temperature drops to -30 degrees? It may seem that the conical dwelling of the Great Plains Indians is just a tent, incapable of protecting against the harsh winter. However, this structure is one of the most sophisticated and ingeniously designed engineering solutions ever created by man. It is not just a shelter, but a complex climatic system that uses the laws of physics to create warmth and comfort. It turns smoke, cold wind, and fire into its allies, not enemies. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the Indians of the Great Plains turned their dwellings into real, breathing machines for survival. What if I told you that everything you believed when looking at a teepee is not entirely true? At first glance, a teepee seems like an extremely simple structure. Long poles tied together and covered with bison hides form a cone, a familiar and basic shape. Many consider it a spacious but primitive tent, suitable only for temporary shelter from rain or sun. This simplicity is deceptive and hides a deep understanding of the laws of nature. In fact, the teepee is a highly efficient and complex engineering system. It cannot be compared to a modern tent, which simply blocks wind and water. The teepee is a full-fledged house, designed for permanent living in one of the harshest climatic regions of the world, the Great Plains. Here, winters bring icy winds and deep frosts, while summers bring exhausting heat. The secret lies not in the materials, although they are certainly important. The secret lies in the shape and interaction of several key components. There is not a single random detail in the design of a teepee. Every stick, every seam on the cover, every loop has its own specific purpose and serves a common goal: to create a stable and comfortable microclimate inside. If a modern engineer were to design such a dwelling, he would talk about heating, ventilation, and insulation systems. Surprisingly, the teepee has all of these. The central hearth serves as a heater. The clever system of valves at the top serves as an adjustable exhaust fan, and the inner lining serves as a full-fledged insulating wall. It is a house that actively breathes. Unlike stationary houses such as log cabins or dugouts, the teepee does not try to lock the heat inside. Instead, it creates a constant, controlled flow of air. This circulation allows you to simultaneously maintain a bright fire in the center, completely remove smoke, and keep the heat at the level of the people living there. It is a dynamic, rather than static, approach to heat. This system was not born in a laboratory, but as a result of hundreds of years of observation and experimentation. The Lakota, Cheyenne, Crow, and Comanche peoples perfected this design. They understood how to make cold air work to heat their homes. This knowledge was the key to survival on the endless plains. The teepee design proves that technological perfection does not always mean complexity. Often, the most ingenious solutions look deceptively simple. A teepee is not just a shelter. It is a philosophy of living in harmony with nature, where people do not fight the elements, but use their energy for their own purposes. We are used to thinking that comfort at -30 degrees means thick walls, triple-glazed windows, and central heating. The teepee offers a completely different approach. It shows how warmth can be achieved using only skins, sticks, and fire, but applying them with incredible ingenuity and an understanding of physics. For the peoples of the plains, the teepee was not just a home, it was the center of the universe, a living being. Every part of it had symbolic meaning. But behind this symbolism lay impeccable scientific logic, which made it so effective for centuries. We are just beginning our dive into this ingenious technology. In the following chapters, we will take a detailed look at each element of this system and see how it works. We are very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about such an invisible level of complexity in seemingly simple things? Write about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Are you ready to learn the truth about how to safely build a fire right inside a teepee made of animal skins? The first thing that provides warmth in a teepee is, of course, fire. But building a fire inside an enclosed space made of flammable materials is no trivial task. The Plains Indians solved it with their characteristic elegance by placing the hearth strictly in the center of the dwelling. This arrangement was not accidental or dictated solely by convenience. The central hearth is the heart of the entire climatic system of the teepee. Being in the center, it distributes heat as efficiently as possible in all directions. Heat radiation spreads evenly in a circle, warming everyone sitting around it. The hearth itself was small and shallow, often just a round patch of cleared ground, sometimes lined with stones. The Indians did not build huge fires like the ones we see in movies. Their fires were small but very efficient. They understood that a large fire consumes too much fuel and creates excess smoke. Only dry, high-quality wood was used for the fire. This was important for reducing smoke and increasing heat transfer. Controlling the fire was a real art. Women, who were traditionally responsible for the household, knew how to maintain just enough flame, as was necessary at any given moment. The heat from the fire not only warmed people, but also heated the air inside the teepee. This heated air became lighter and, in accordance with the laws of physics, began to rise. It was this movement of warm air that was the engine that drove the entire ventilation system. The fire in the center also helped keep things dry inside the dwelling. In wet weather or during snowmelt, moisture was a big problem. A constant source of dry heat in the center allowed wet clothes or supplies to dry quickly, preventing mold and dampness. Safety was paramount. Although the skin covering was durable, it could still catch fire. Therefore, the fire was always monitored. The small size of the hearth and the constant circulation of air, carrying sparks upward, minimized the risk. The stones around the hearth also served as a barrier. Sitting around this central fire, the family did more than just keep warm. The fire was the center of social life. Around it, they told stories, ate, worked, and slept. It was the physical and spiritual center of the home, providing not only warmth, but also light in the darkness of the long winter nights. This small, controlled fire was the reference point for the entire system. Without it, the teepee would have been just a cone of skins. But with fire, it became a living, breathing organism where heat and air were in constant motion. But how did the smoke from this fire not fill the entire space and make life inside unbearable? It was all thanks to the ingenious design of the top. In the next chapter, we will reveal the secret of the unique ventilation system that was the lungs of this dwelling. What I am about to show you is perhaps the most ingenious engineering solution in the entire teepee design. If the central fire is the heart, then the smoke vents at the top are the lungs of the dwelling. These are not just holes in the roof, as one might think. They are a complex, fully adjustable ventilation system. At the top of the teepee, where the poles meet, the canvas was not sewn shut. Instead, it formed two movable flaps, similar to ears. These flaps did not just hang in the air, but were controlled by two special poles that were longer than all the others. These two poles were not part of the supporting frame. They were installed on the outside, and their lower ends rested on the ground. By moving these poles, a woman could adjust the position of the smoke valves with precision. She could open, close, or turn them in any direction. The secret to the effectiveness of this system lay in an understanding of aerodynamics. The valves were always turned so that their backs faced the wind. Regardless of where the wind was blowing from, the smoke vent was always on the leeward side. It was absolutely ingenious. This arrangement created a low-pressure zone directly above the smoke vent. The wind, flowing around the cone and valves, acted like a pump, actively pulling smoke out of the teepee. This physical principle is known as the Venturi effect. It provided powerful and constant draft. Thanks to this, smoke from the central hearth never accumulated inside. It rose in a straight, even column and was immediately vented outside. Even in strong winds, the smoke was not blown back into the dwelling. The system worked flawlessly in all weather conditions. These same valves were also used to regulate the temperature. On a warm day, they could be opened wider to increase circulation and cool the room. During heavy snowstorms or rain, they could be closed tightly, leaving only a small gap sufficient for the smoke to escape. The art of controlling these valves was passed down from generation to generation. Women knew exactly how to adjust them, guided by the slightest change in wind direction or strength. It was a constant, subtle adjustment that turned the teepee into a living organism that responded to its environment. No other nomadic dwelling in the world, whether a yurt or a chum, had such a complex and effective ventilation control system. In a yurt, for example, the smoke hole at the top was static. In a teepee, it was dynamic and completely controllable. It was this lung system that made it safe and comfortable to burn a fire inside. It solved the main problem of any dwelling with a hearth, the problem of smoke. And it solved it with incredible elegance. If you like how a seemingly simple solution solves such a complex problem, give this video a thumbs up. Want to know the secret that turns a simple cone shape into a powerful engine? We already know that fire heats the air and valves release smoke. But what makes this system work so smoothly? The answer lies in the shape of the tip itself, its conical design. This shape was chosen not only because it is wind-resistant. The cone is the ideal aerodynamic tool for creating natural draft. It works exactly like a modern factory smokestack or a fireplace in a house. The main physical principle here is the draft effect, or chimney effect. As we have already mentioned, hot air heated by fire becomes less dense and lighter. It rises, displaced by colder and heavier air coming from below. The conical shape of the teepee acts like a giant funnel. It collects all the rising warm air from the entire volume of the dwelling. As it rises, the cone narrows, causing the airflow to accelerate. This creates a constant and stable movement of air from bottom to top. This is not just a weak movement, it is a powerful, directed flow. It carries with it all the smoke, steam, and odors from cooking. The system works automatically as long as the fire is burning. The stronger the fire burns, the stronger the draft becomes. This natural draft was vital. It not only removed smoke, but also constantly supplied the fire with fresh oxygen. Without the inflow of fresh air, the fire would quickly go out, filling the dwelling with carbon monoxide. The tupa provided the perfect balance. The cone shape also helped the smoke to collect in a narrow column. It did not have time to spread throughout the room and come into contact with the colder upper parts of the roof. It went straight into the open valves, leaving the air at human level clean and clear. Surprisingly, the height of the cone was also important. The higher the pipe, the stronger the draft. With a height of 5 to 6 meters, teepees were ideal chimneys, ensuring quick and efficient evacuation of combustion products. The Indians may not have known the formal laws of thermodynamics, but they intuitively understood how air and heat work. They created a design that perfectly utilizes these laws to create a comfortable and safe environment. But what prevented cold air from simply seeping in from below through the cracks and ruining the whole effect by creating drafts? In the next chapter, we will look at the secret component that solved this very problem and was perhaps second in importance only to the smoke vents. Many people do not realize that the classic winter teepee is actually a two-layer structure. It is this second inner layer that is one of the main secrets of warmth. Without it, the entire ingenious ventilation system would work much less efficiently. This inner layer is called an ozan, or simply an inner lining. It was a wide strip of thinner, well-tanned skins, or later canvas. This ozan was not part of the main cover, but was attached to the poles separately. The lining was hung from the inside on poles at a height of about 1.5 to 2 meters. From there, it hung down freely, not reaching the ground, and sometimes curling inward. It was extremely important that it did not fit snugly against the outer wall of the teepee. There was an air gap several centimeters wide between the ozan and the main covering. This gap is the key to understanding the entire insulation system. It turned the Tipi into something like a modern double-glazed window or thermos. This air gap served as a powerful heat insulator. It prevented the cold from the outer covering, which was exposed to frost and wind, from penetrating into the living space. The heat from the fire and people's bodies was reflected from the ozan back into the room. But this lining had a second, even more important function related to air circulation. It was an integral part of the very breathing machine we talked about. It was responsible for keeping the air in the Tipi fresh, but not cold. The inner lining created comfort. It covered the bare poles and dark outer covering, making the interior brighter and neater. Often, the ozan was richly decorated with drawings or embroidery, turning it into a true work of art. This element was especially important in winter. In summer, it could be removed to increase air circulation and make the dwelling cooler. But as soon as the cold weather set in, the ozan was immediately returned to its place, becoming the main protection against drafts. Thus, the outer cover protected against wind and precipitation. And the inner lining, the ozan, was responsible for warmth, comfort, and, as we shall see, the proper direction of air currents. It was this division of functions that made the system incredibly flexible. Without the ozan, the Tipi would have been just a shelter from the weather. With the ozan, it became a warm, comfortable home, capable of withstanding the harshest frosts of the Great Plains. Guess what happens when the icy street air meets this double wall? For the draft system to work, it needs a constant supply of fresh air for the fire. This air has to come from somewhere. In the Tipi, it came from below, under the edge of the main cover. The outer tire of the Tipi never lay flat on the ground. There was always a small gap between its lower edge and the ground. Cold outside air inevitably penetrated the dwelling through this gap. And this is where the ozan came into play. If this inner lining had not been there, the icy air with the blizzard would have flowed directly into the living area. It would have blown across the floor, freezing the feet and backs of sleeping people and creating unbearable drafts. The entire effect of the central fire would have been negated, but the ozan completely blocked this flow. Descending almost to the floor, it became a barrier to the cold air. The draft could not penetrate the center of the room. It was trapped in the air gap between the two walls, and this is where the most ingenious part begins. Once in this gap, the cold air could go nowhere but up. It began to move along the channel between the ozan and the outer cover. This channel led it straight to the top of the cone. However, on its way up, this air began to mix with the warm air that was already inside the Tipi. It was preheated, so to speak, as it passed along the warm inner wall of the ozan. By the time it reached the living area, it was no longer icy, but most of it did not reach the living area. This stream of fresh, but no longer icy air rose upward and was then drawn into the fire zone. It fed the flames with fresh oxygen, which was necessary for combustion. Thus, the ozone solved three problems at once. It insulated the living space from the cold outer wall, it blocked direct drafts at floor level, and it directed the incoming cold air along a safe route, where it was heated and fed the fire without disturbing the people. Inside the Tipi, ideal circulation was created. Warm air and smoke rose from the center and exited through the valves. Fresh air entered from below, passed through the heating channel in the walls, and fed the fire. And in the space where people lived, it was warm, smoke-free, and draft-free. This system is a masterpiece of engineering. It allowed a comfortable temperature to be maintained at floor level, even when a blizzard was raging outside. This system protected against the air, but what about the cold ground? In the next chapter, we will learn how the Indians insulated the floor of their dwellings. Even with a fire and perfect air circulation, cold, frozen ground can take away all the heat. The ground is a huge, cold storage unit. Therefore, floor insulation was no less important than wall insulation. The inhabitants of the plains knew this and paid close attention to the floor. First of all, before installing the Tipi, the site was carefully selected and prepared. The site was leveled, stones and debris were removed. Sometimes even the top layer of turf was removed to create a level base. This was especially important during the cold season. The main insulating material was dry grass, wormwood, or sage branches. They were laid out in a thick, elastic layer throughout the living space inside the tipi. This layer created an air gap that cut off the cold coming from the ground. Skins were laid on top of this plant mattress. First and foremost, these were thick, untanned bison skins, which served as a rough floor. They were durable and provided additional insulation. On top of them were soft, well-tanned furs and bison robes with the fur intact. People sat on them during the day and slept on them at night. This multi-layered pie on the floor was warm, soft, and dry. It was much more comfortable than one might imagine. Sleeping places were usually located around the perimeter, near the walls. People slept with their heads against the wall and their feet toward the fire. Their backs were protected from any possible cold not only by the ozan, but also by special backrests made of willow rods. In winter, additional measures were taken to seal the tipi. Outside, around the entire perimeter of the tipi, a mound of earth or snow was piled up. This mound pressed the lower edge of the cover tightly to the ground, completely blocking any gaps. In addition to internal engineering solutions, the external location of the tipi also played a huge role. The installation of the dwelling was no less important than its construction. Experienced housewives, who were responsible for the installation, took into account many factors, the main one being the wind. The door of the tipi almost always faced east. This had a deep symbolic meaning. The dwelling welcomed the rising sun, which gave life and warmth. But this rule also had a very important practical side. On the Great Plains, prevailing winds blow from the west and northwest. By placing the tipi entrance to the east, the inhabitants turned its back to the strongest wind. This was the most stable position. The conical shape itself provides excellent resistance to the wind, allowing it to flow around the structure. However, the rear of the tipi, where the poles were grouped more tightly, was the most durable. It took the brunt of the elements, while the entrance remained in a calm zone. The entrance itself was small, usually oval or teardrop-shaped. Its small size minimized heat loss when entering and exiting. An adult had to bend slightly to get inside. The entrance was closed with a heavy curtain made of a piece of skin, often with fur. This curtain was not just a curtain. It fit snugly against the opening, keeping out the wind and cold. From the inside, it could be secured with special wooden sticks. In particularly cold weather, a double door system was often used. One curtain hung on the outside, and a second one hung on the inside, in the opening of the ozan. This created a small vestibule that blocked the cold air even more effectively. The tipi was not a static structure that was built once and forgotten. It was more like a complex musical instrument that required constant tuning. Microclimate control was a daily art that the women of the tribe mastered to perfection. The inhabitants of the tipi were not passive observers, but active operators of their home climate system. They constantly monitored changes in weather, wind direction, and temperature, and made adjustments to the functioning of their dwelling. The main control levers were, of course, the two smoke vent poles. The slightest change in wind direction required an immediate response. A woman would go outside and slightly move the poles, turning the ears of the tipi so that the draft remained ideal and the smoke was not blown inside. They also constantly controlled the fire. For quick heating in the morning, the fire was made stronger. During the day, while cooking, it was kept at one level. At night, it was kept smoldering slowly so that the coals would give off even heat until morning. Not only the top, but also the hem of the tipi was adjusted. On a warm, windless day, the lower edge of the cover could be lifted and secured to poles. This created a wide gap for air to flow in, and the tipi turned into a cool, ventilated tent. In winter, on the contrary, everything was carefully sealed. If the wind picked up, women could further secure the tire from the outside, by weighing it down with stones or logs to completely eliminate unwanted drafts. The inner lining, the ozan, was also a control element. It could be raised or lowered to regulate the flow of air in the interwall space. It was similar to controlling a damper in a stove. Even the entrance curtain was part of this system. It could be pulled back to quickly ventilate the room or tightly secured during a snowstorm. It was a simple but effective adjustment. In conclusion, it is safe to say that the Tipi is one of the greatest achievements of indigenous engineering. It is not just a dwelling, but a holistic, integrated system where each element works in harmony with the others. Its design perfectly combines several seemingly mutually exclusive tasks. It allows you to burn an open fire without suffocating from smoke. It provides a constant flow of fresh air, but there are no drafts. It has thin, lightweight walls, yet retains heat in extreme cold. This is achieved not by the brute force of materials, as in modern homes, but by the intelligent management of physical processes, convection, draft, and insulation. The system of a central fire, conical shape, adjustable valves, and double-layered walls with an ozan forms an ideal circulation cycle. It is a breathing machine that ventilates and heats itself using the energy of fire and wind. The Tipi was perfectly adapted to the environment of the Great Plains. Its conical shape withstood hurricane-force winds that would have easily destroyed a square structure. Its stability was phenomenal. It was warm in winter, providing comfort in the harshest frosts. But it was also cool in summer. By lifting the edges of the cover, the inhabitants turned it into a shady, wind-swept canopy that provided relief from the heat. And of course, it was mobile. This entire complex climate station could be dismantled, packed up, and ready for transport in an hour. This was critical for a nomadic lifestyle that followed the bison herds. No other dwelling in the world combined such a level of comfort, all-season usability, wind resistance, and mobility. The yurt was stable but difficult to assemble and not as effective in terms of ventilation. The wigwam was simpler but could not withstand the winds of the plains. We have seen how the seemingly simple design of the Tipi is actually a highly sophisticated climate control system. The ingenious combination of a central fire, adjustable smoke vents, a conical shape, and double-layered walls with an ozan allowed the indigenous peoples of the Great Plains to live in comfort even during the harshest winters. What other aspects of the life or technology of indigenous peoples would you like us to explore? Perhaps you are interested in their clothing, hunting methods, or social structure. Suggest topics in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new episodes.